Thanks, Mr. Maltz. And now recognize Ms. Lee from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. Today's hearing has allowed us all an opportunity to see how the crisis of fentanyl is affecting every community in America. In my own community in Florida, authorities seized more than 11 pounds of fentanyl, and this amount alone was enough to kill 2.7 million people. Agent Maltz, I'd like to return to your testimony. As a former federal prosecutor, I recognize the critical work that DEA agents are doing every day across America to fight the cartels and to keep America safe. One thing, a distinction that you've made here today that I think is important, I'd like for you to share with us a bit about how this problem has grown in its scope and the difference between organized crime and what you would categorize as narco-terrorists. Tell us, what is a narco-terrorist and what has led you to that conclusion?
Great question. I really appreciate that because I lived this nightmare for many years, over 10 years. When I was the head of the Special Operations Division, I wasn't reading in the local newspapers. I was living it with my counterparts around the world. And so China started the synthetic bombing campaign around 2008, 2009 with K2 spice and bath salts. Please go read about it. You'll see all the catastrophes in the country from those synthetic drugs. Then around 2012, they started with the fentanyl analogs in the mail services through the internet websites. Then they started sending pure fentanyl to Mexico. They also started, of course, for years, they've been sending precursor chemicals to make methamphetamine. That's why we have tons of methamphetamine in the country. We didn't even talk about that today. That's another whole hearing. Now, in Mexico, they're using all of that money, they're building up capabilities. They're buying weapon systems. They're dropping C4 explosives on their adversaries. I went down to the border, and there were 9,000 drones coming into America surveilling our brave men and women in Border Patrol. This is unacceptable. We're at war with the cartels, but we're still treating it like they're drug traffickers. They're not drug cartels. Please stop saying drug cartels. They're narco-terrorists like we've never seen. They run the country in Mexico. They intimidate. They corrupt. They are slaughtering people, chopping off heads, dismembering bodies. And they have arsenals. They have weapons that we don't even have, in certain countries around the world. So they have evolved. Everything's evolving. And the problem is the government is still using old talking points. This is not grandpa's opioid crisis. Okay, the pills, that's years ago. Yes, kids got addicted because of Big Pharma. Somebody said that. And Big Pharma never got held accountable because it's all about the money. Now, the cartels and China are the focus of our problem, so we need to deal with them.
So, Agent Maltz, in light of that changing landscape, in light of the escalation of the severity of this type of organization, how does that change what you need and what we should be doing here in Congress to equip DEA and your law enforcement partners to fight this fight?
DEA needs resources, but so does all the agencies as far as manpower. You know why? A lot of them are quitting. They're running away. They're getting jobs in the private sector because they're sick and tired of lack of action. And the boss of the DEA right now, she's running around with a one pill can kill campaign, spreading awareness like we've never seen. I go back to this committee can ask the Department of Education, what are they doing? And why is CDC not putting out timely and accurate stats on the greatest crisis to the history of this country? What's the answer to that? Because as a taxpayer, I'd like to see the CDC director, because she's already fell on the sword on the lack of reporting on COVID and the inaccuracies. How's that acceptable with all the technology we have? There's no consistency across the country. The guy in Kings County, Washington, talked about no cooler space. They're not trained. They don't have the technologies. So there's a lot of accountability that needs to be brought to the table in this town. But the DEA, they're going to continue to fight, just like Homeland Security, the FBI, ATF, the Marshals, because they get paid to save lives. The problem is it's much bigger than DEA and the law enforcement now. That's why we need to consider other options with the great patriots that work behind the scenes that could do some real good devastation. They could decimate the production labs. Why is that a bad thing? Decimate chemical production labs. And I wish there were more people over here that would listen to this, but they're not interested. They're out there doing something else. I don't know what's more important than the death of our kids.
Agent Malls, another question. Can you tell us what it means when a substance is classified as Schedule I, Schedule II? How is that important, and what would it mean to you all in terms of the work that you're doing to try to combat this problem?
Well, a third grader can understand that you don't want to put deadly substances on the street. You want to at least categorize them as Schedule I drugs. Fentanyl, the pharmaceutical grade fentanyl, is a Schedule II and needs to remain a Schedule II. But the illicit fentanyl substances that are out there, it's like whack-a-mole. The DEA and all the agencies, they can't keep up with the way these guys are changing the different chemical compounds, and it's like, it's just so common. You just need common sense to understand that argument. They're killing our kids. We need to classify fentanyl-related substances as Schedule I. That's not going to solve this problem, but it's something that will help.
Thank you, Agent Malls. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.